Here we are on in Yaakov, Brachot, and page 22a. There you go. So it says, Tanya, we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera said, he said, so you have Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera saying, Ein divrei Torah mekablen tuma, that the words of Torah are not receptacles for spiritual impurity. Okay? In other words, this is why, I'll give you a halacha here. People have a mishagas, that when they're carrying the Torah, they didn't want women to kiss the Torah, because there could be chas v'sholom and nida. That is stupidity, and I can't say it any stronger than that. And why? Because Torah is not mekabel tuma. So if you want to tell me that she's touching it with nida and she's full of tuma and it's being transferred, impossible. It's the same thing with a man, by the way. If he had a zav, if he had a flow, a nocturnal emission, whatever the case is going to be, which is what we're dealing with in this Gemara. Actually, the point is, it's not mekabel. He's tamei. It's true. He is spiritually impure. He has to become tahor, but through a process. But still, no, he by touching the Torah or by saying words of Torah, he's not defiling them. The problem is that you have Ezra. Ezra came along and said a person who's a bal carrier, and I think we learned this before, said that you're not supposed to learn Torah until you go to the mikvah. Shouldn't say words of Torah. But and we're going to get, let's see, does he say it really quickly? Yeah, so this is going against Ezra's thing. Like I said, okay, I think we learned before. Did we learn about Ezra's decree? Because I'll just give it to you quickly otherwise. Ezra said, in order to keep people away, in order to keep the guys away from the young ladies and thinking about their wives so much, he said, if one experiences a nocturnal emission, which is only going to be brought about by those thoughts, okay? So then that person cannot study Torah until he immerses in the mikvah. So nobody wants to have to go to every morning to the mikvah, okay? Because that was saying that it was an identification of I had a nocturnal emission, which is why, because normally you wouldn't go. Today, strangely enough, the Hasidim all go, not because of nocturnal emission, but it's because of the Takana from Ezra. They go, I guess, to cover everybody else up, but it became a big thing to go to the mikvah. It's brought down in the Mishnah Brora also, and that's why some guys even used my pool when they were the yeshiva guys. Because they wanted to follow Takana's Ezra to go to the decree of Ezra and thus go to the mikvah, namely my pool, every morning. I thought it was a nice way to have a good reason to go swimming. But nonetheless, they would use that, and you don't really need a real mikvah for that. You just need a place with 40 sa'ah, whatever that comes out to, of water, which is probably I heard between 80 and 200 gallons. Nice spread there. 80 and 200, I don't know where they come up with the numbers, but it's, what was I going to say? But it can be drawn water. A mikvah has to be living water, so it has to be rainwater, pure, or spring water. It can't just be collected waters. The pool is obviously collected waters, and that's not a problem for Takanas Ezra, the decree of Ezra. That wouldn't be a problem. So now, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, though, is coming to say that decree, as it were, doesn't exist today. Like you said, in general, I'll just give the article for this. In general, rabbinic decrees cannot be nullified by a later sage acting unilaterally. They may be rescinded only by a court greater in size and wisdom than the original court which passed the decree. Given this, the commentators ask, how is it that Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera was able to simply disregard Ezra's decree barring a bal keri, person who experienced a nocturnal emission, from the study of Torah? So addressing this problem, Tosfos offers three suggestions. One is Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera maintains that as a matter of historical fact, Ezra never issued any such decree restricting a Balkari. That's number one. Or number two, he concedes that Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera concedes that Ezra did indeed enact a decree, but asserts that Ezra stipulated at the time that the decree could be rescinded by later generations, even by a court of lesser size and stature. And finally, number C, the decree was never widely accepted by the majority of the Jewish people. In such cases, the decree does not achieve a binding status. So you have three possibilities. One is Ezra never decreed never issued the decree with the force of the law. Number two, he did, but he allowed, within that decree, he allowed later generations, even if they're not greater than his, to nullify it. And number three, since the people didn't accept it, then it never had the force. And this is also, by the way, number C is probably the strongest argument you're going to have, because anytime the rabbis make a decree, if we the people, to use American language, if we the people do not accept it because it's too hard to follow, whatever the case is going to be, then it does not become binding. It's not a binding halacha, which is why the rabbis of recent vintage never issued a ban against smoking. No. Everybody asks, but we know it's dangerous. Why don't the rabbis come out and ban smoking? The furthest we went with that, as far as I remember, was Rav Moshe Feinstein said that if one has not yet started to smoke, then one is forbidden to smoke. I believe he said that. I'm not even sure about that. But as far as a person who's already smoking, he never forbade him because he's hooked. Because the nicotine or whatever they put into the cigarettes that hooks a person, he's addicted. You can't tell a person who's sick, get better. I demand you to get better. You can't do that. So if the person can get better, a person will stop. But you couldn't make that a demand. And since the majority of people, even if Rav Moshe did say the first statement, which I think he did, namely that you're not allowed to start smoking, since that wasn't accepted by a large majority of people, it doesn't have the binding law. So if somebody wants to have a reason not to smoke, they can say, I heard, and Rav Moshe said, I'm not allowed to smoke. Fine. Use that, which is what they would say about Ezra. Why did people go to the mikvah? Because Ezra was trying to get us to a higher spiritual level. He wanted to maintain Judaism. So what he did was he made this decree that if I have a nocturnal emission, then I should go to the mikvah. Fine. Even though it wasn't accepted by the majority of people, I'm going to accept it upon myself, and therefore I'm going to try to elevate myself out of that mindset. Because who wants to go to the mikveh every single morning when you get up? It's just a hard thing to do. For those people who do it, great, but if you, it's still, we identify the Hasidim as doing it. You don't have the rest of Judaism doing that. Okay, so that would be number one. That's number one. So that we have to understand that Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera was working on some premise that he could nullify the decree of Ezra if Ezra ever made the decree and we accepted it. Okay, so that's all that goes wrong there. But he said straight out, he's holding that the words of Torah are not the kabel tuma. They are not receptacles for spiritual impurity. So now we have a story. It says Maaseh b'Talmud Echad. We have a story about one student. Sh'ayim a gamgein v'korei l'mala Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. He was stuttering when it came to the name of God because he was a Balkari. He wasn't sure. Should I say the name of God? Shouldn't I say the name of God? Because if I say the name of God, then and I'm a Balkari, so then I may be defiling the name of God. Maybe I'm a Kabbalah. It could be Makabal Tumah. Who knows? So Amalei, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera said to the boy, Beni, Petach Picha, open your mouth, Ve'iru Devarecha, and let your word shine forth. She'en divrei Torah mekabel tumah, because the words of Torah are not mekabel tumah. So don't be afraid to daven, don't be afraid to learn Psalm Zionism. And how does he prove it? Shedemar, as it says in the book of Jeremiah, Haloko divrei ke'esh, that behold, my words are like fire, says God. Ma eish en mekabel tumah, just as fire cannot be a receptacle for spiritual impurity, af divrei Torah eina makablim tuma. So also the words of Torah are not receptacles for, like I said, spiritual impurity. Okay, so the first thing we have to understand is the guy was a ball carrier, and that's where his whole question was coming from. So the Yaakov says like this. He says the main. I'll give it to you in Hebrew first. He says the ikar kaped ahayalahem shlo yilamed mitoch hasefer. That the original being particular on the person was that he shouldn't learn from the midst of a book. Because since he was tamei, so they were afraid that he would make the book impure, and to this Rabbi Yossi learned. He was learning B'Regilut. He was always learning, and since it was quick on his tongue, he was normal to say it. So we didn't suspect that he was learning from a book. Okay, since that was like the Shema. We don't need to read the Shema inside of the Torah. We know the Shema. Every Jew knows the Shema. So we rule that anything that is shagir b'piv, which is fluent in our mouth, that we don't have to read from the Sefer. If, on the other hand, it's not, so then we have to look in the book because we don't want to get it wrong. So it says, this Talmud, this student, Shelo Ratza Lemo Mitoch HaSefer, that he didn't want to look inside the book because of his tumah. So that's why he was stuttering. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera said to him, don't worry, you can look inside the book because the words of Torah are not mekabel tumah. And so you don't have to be so careful, and it's permissible to read from the book, and therefore open your mouth. Okay? Here's an example of when people stretch their understanding. Okay, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera had to say something according to Ibn Yaakov. Can I open the book? Can't I open the book? You said I can't learn Torah. So what does that mean? That the Torah, it's in the book. Can I think Torah? What's going on? And so this guy thought I can't open the book, so I have to say it all from memory. So now if I'm stuttering, if I'm stammering, or whatever the case is going to be, so then because I'm not looking. He tells you, open the book. Okay. You have then you have the Aleph Yosef. Here it was. She says, Divrei Torah do not accept, are not receptacles for Tumah, this spiritual impurity. So again, they're quoting Rav Yonah, and he says there's some portion that say that it's only referring to the Kriyat Shema. I'm sorry, there are some who say there's no difference between the Kriyat Shema and other readings of the Torah, because in all these cases they are not receptacles for Tumah. But he says this is not necessarily correct, because certainly some people only say it's referring to the Shema. So we're now looking at what is accepting of it, what is a receptacle for Tumah, what's not. But the rest of the Torah, he says, would be a receptacle would be usher to do. Why? Because you despise the word of Hashem. That's what got you into this in the first place. Remember, I'm thinking about things I shouldn't have done, or I'm reading Torah in a dirty place. In other words, I'm walking down the street of New York, or New York is probably best, where they have dirt on the street, they have feces on the street, they have everything you can think of on the streets, certain streets.
Or you're walking through an alley, maybe.
Walking through an alley, you have garbage, and you're saying words of Torah. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to. You have to shut your mouth. Okay, so it's and he says because so that he was mocked. They're mocking on themselves. They were stringent on themselves more than because there's different types of being cut off from the Jewish people. And he says in every other type of being excommunicated. How would you say cutting off? Excommunication? No. Spiritual death. I don't know. That's all I'll have to say. The different types of spiritual death that would be mechaper, that could be atoned for. And there's some that they cannot be atoned for. So that's where you're getting into here. Where, as a Baal Keri, are we getting into a situation where this is something that could be atoned for or something that can't be atoned for? And so he continues to say that some people say that no, it goes back and forth. He's going back and forth in this, but ultimately that's the argument that he's dealing with. Okay, I won't go through the whole argument, but that's the argument. Some things you do get cut off for if I'm doing it incorrectly, and some things you can be mechaper for. But the Rif says it the nicest. The Rif really brings it down to what's going on here. He said, he gives you a case. I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. Yeah. So he says, you have a person. Oh no, I'm in the wrong place. Oh, it's the next one. Okay, next one. Okay, so that's where that was. So we understand that if a person becomes a Baal Keri, certainly today, there's absolutely no prohibition. You learn Torah because it's better in Torah. The reason that Ezra said something about it, whether or not he made the decree, whether or not the decree held, it's irrelevant to this point. He did it to keep people away from, as the Mishnah says, as the Gemara says, keep the guys away from the women, just like you want to keep a rooster away from the hens. Okay, because that's how the guys were. They wanted to be around the women, and they would waste their time with them trying to figure out, what guys wanted to do instead of learning Torah. So he wanted to get people back into the Beis Medrash and following the law. The reason he wanted to get people back to the Beis Medrash, by the way, was in Ezra's time. He was coming back to Israel to rebuild the walls, and Israel was in a mess. Spiritually, it was in a mess. There was a tremendous amount of intermarriage, a lot of ignorance from about Torah, and so what he wanted to do was bring people back to Torah. The only way to bring a person back to Torah properly is to have them learn Torah, have them be involved in Torah, because nobody wants to just listen to rules being given to them. They want to know the reasons why. And they want to understand, they want to feel that there's something behind what they're doing besides just blind observance. So what Ezra did was, he did that. He tried to bring people back. At the same time, he's trying to get them out of the gutters, of the spiritual gutters. So he's raising that level, and he's going up and up and up, besides, again, getting rid of the foreign wives that we had. He wanted to have us learning. So, but he didn't want us to be learning just for the intellectual, growth. He wanted us to do learning for actual action. And if I'm going to keep remaining in the bowels of society, Torah will not be able to affect me as much as if I get out of that. So really, that's why he's setting up all these decrees. Okay. Without Ezra, we probably wouldn't be here today to discuss this. But that's what he was trying to do. And that's why, even though we didn't, either we did accept it and they just nullified it, or we didn't accept it, we couldn't live up to it, I'm not sure. That would be the interesting question, because since Tosfos gives those choices, the question would really be, what happened? We don't know. So next Gemara, it says, Hayim mitpalel. Here you are, a person is praying. Umatza soa, and he finds feces bimkomo, in his place. Amarava, Rava said, Al pi shechet, even though this person sinned, his prayer is still prayer. What's his sin, by the way?
Praying in a dirty place.
Correct. Praying in a dirty place. Okay, so Matkif le Rava argued against him. Rava argued against Rava, and he says, "Hi, Ezra Chashayim To'eva." Behold, it says that the sacrifices of the wicked are To'eva, are despicable. They're an abomination. They're abomination. Ela Amar Rava. So Rava said, "Hoel v'chet." Since this person sinned, since he began to daven in a place that had feces, Al pi palel, even though he prayed, tfilato to'eva, his prayer is an abomination. Okay. So now I won't go through the whole. I will not go through the whole thing because I don't want to pull you through every part of the argument. But basically, what's happening here is, according to the Rif, that if the person started davening in a place, before I said like this, before I start davening, I have to look around. I have to make sure that the place I'm davening is clean. Okay, that's my responsibility. If I, on the other hand, just start davening, I'm on the beach, or I'm on the street, and as many times we will find ourselves for mincha.
Yeah.
Okay? Mincha is the one time you don't know where you're going to find yourself davening. Okay? Unless you're always living in South Bend and that area, and you can get to shul. But for the most part, we've all davened mincha on the highway, by the beach, in the airports, wherever we're going to be. And bus stations, certainly bus stations. So the question is, I have to look around. I have to look around me and make sure there's nothing if I'm in the subways, there's no vomit. All these things I have to watch out for. Okay? And as a result, if I don't, and I just start davening because it's getting late and I'm not really thinking about it, and then suddenly I look around or I smell something and I think, what's going on? And I see it. Well, there's an argument. So according to the first opinion, Rava, even though I was wrong, that I didn't safeguard the place, okay, and I didn't make sure that there's a place to daven, even so, I fulfilled my obligation. According to Rava, on the other hand, no. Once you didn't take the precautions necessary and you start to daven, you messed up. Now, there's a halacha that the Rif goes through, and he says that the halacha states that if I start to daven in one place and I realize something was bad there, I either walk away for almost one way or in front of it, or whatever the case is going to be. Okay? And so Rav is saying there that doesn't work either. Why? Because in order to fix up what I've done, in other words, the first part, let's say the first part of the Shemona Esrei, I did incorrectly because I was near the feces, right? Then I realized it there, so okay, I have to move, so I moved. So the rest of the tefillah was now in good status. So Rava has said you could join those two things, and therefore your tefillah was good. Rava said no, you can't, because your first three brachas of Shemona Esrei were said when they weren't supposed to be said, because you had feces here. And you need the whole Shemona Esrei to run together. So the fact that your first three were no good, even though you moved, and you're in a good place right now, those don't join. So what you've done is more than that. You've had bracha levatala, bracha in vain, and you had a messed up tefillah. Now, both Rava would say to you that the way to fix the whole thing up is, of course, to daven again. Both of them will say you can daven again, which again is a problem, because it means the first one was absolutely good, which means you had 18 brachos in vain. Okay? So even though you could fix it up and you could make your tefillah good, your first tefillah was still an abomination, according to Rava, because you messed up and you didn't look around. Okay? So before we daven, the point of this Gemara is very important, that we need to know what's around us. It also gets into another thing is the very next part of this, namely, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yochanan. Rav Shmuel, the son of Rav Nachman, he said in the name of Rav Yochanan, Hanitrach in the kevav, if one needs to go to the bathroom, then one must go to the bathroom. You do not wait. Okay? And he says, Harei zeh lo yipalel, this person should not daven. Why? Shnema says, prepare yourself to prepare to go before to meet Hashem. Okay? So if I'm going to go to talk to Hashem, then I can't be worrying about having to go to the bathroom. So there are times I have to check myself. That's why before you go to daven, you should think, do I have to go to the bathroom or not? And if you haven't gone yet, you should try to go, because you don't want to be interrupted during tefillah where suddenly you have this urge to go. If you do, then you have to start. In other words, if you went, and let's say you start to daven, and you daven along Shemona Esrei, I guess that's what's going to happen. Okay, and in the middle of Shemona Esrei, suddenly you feel you have to go. Well, you don't stop there. Now you have to judge. Can I make it to the end or can't I? If it's a matter of you can't, you have to stop right then and you go. But if you could finish and with enough time to walk, I think it's 8 amos after that or something, it's which is about 16 feet, probably. 8 amos is 16 feet. But if you have enough time, you can make it basically through Kedusha. So then you don't stop and you finish your Shemona Esrei and go. Okay? But the point is that, and it's going along with here, not only am I worried about the feces outside, but also the feces here. If my stomach, that's why if a person has the runs, again, you don't start davening. Because you're going to be running back. You don't put tefillin on.
Get started.
You're not allowed, right? You're not allowed to put tefillin on that until your stomach settles down. That's why you have people come to Minyan and they don't put tefillin on. Why? Because they have a bad stomach. They're from people. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying a person who never puts tefillin on. A person who puts tefillin on normally, but you see somebody who don't put tefillin on, you have to assume that the guy's stomach is not good. Okay, and because you can't, if you would put it on, your body is constantly in that flux of going. You don't have a clean body for that, and that's what they're talking about in the halacha when it says you don't have a clean body. Besides maybe flatulent, you can be flatulent with tefillin on. Okay, but the whole, again, for Bali Shuvah this becomes a problem because it's new frumkeit. So I have to put tefillin on. No, but you're breaking the law by doing that. And you have to explain that to people. That it's such a hard concept. But I want to do that. You can't. You just can't do certain things. But that's what he's saying. So you have to be very careful to make sure that you went to the bathroom already. And we'll stop.
That's it's like the hospital patient is in the hospital on Yom Kippur. I'm going to fast. I said, you got to eat. Oh, I have to fast. You got to eat.
Same thing. 100%.